Evening, everyone. I have 5:30, so it is time to go ahead and get started. Tonight is our September board study session. This is where we do a deeper dive into some of the topics that we're working on. So tonight we have 5 agenda items that the administration is going to present to us. And we are very honored to have students with us tonight. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Snell to get us going. First, I'm going to take just do a quick roll call. It looks like Sandra is still logging in, but I'm going to start with Director Barrows.
Here.
Director Decker.
Here. Director
Smith.
Here.
And I am also here, and I am sure Sandra will be logging on very yep, she's on her way. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone, and we'll start walking through some of the agenda items today. It'll take me a moment to load this here. So these are the topics that we're going to look at this evening, and under goal areas that the board set back in August. So the first one is a board development goal area. We're going to talk a little about the Student Advisory Council and have a couple of students that are going to share about our first meeting. We're going to talk about VITA, the goal around bringing those 2 elementary schools online. And tonight we'll specifically focus on VITA and kind of do a little context historical up to today. We're going to look at student learning with our self-curriculum and screeners and the investment that the district made. Our usual pandemic response update, and just kind of keep everyone in the loop. And then finally, I want to give a preview of a community engagement opportunity that's coming up. So these are the items that we're hoping to, 1, give you a little content, and 2, give an opportunity for you to give us feedback and ask questions, engage in a little deeper than we're able to at a regular board meeting. I wanted to start off, though, with some great news that Christina Iremonger and the IT team just let me know that we did receive just over $5 million in grant funding around connectivity and helping students be more connected. And so we're actually going to be able to use this grant to purchase laptops for all of our secondary students as a part of the device refresh cycle. And so those will be rolling out in fall 2022. So just congratulations to the team in putting that grant together. And it's awesome news, right? Not every day we get to start a board meeting off with over $5 million in grant funding. So way to go, IT team. The other thing I wanted to just acknowledge is Pasco School District lost a bus driver on Friday in a really horrific tragedy. And just wanted to acknowledge Richard Lanhart. He lost his life in service of our students in our state of Washington. And I know that all of our staff have been under a lot of pressure over the last 2 years, and they're working really hard. And when we see events like this, I think we're remiss without calling out that we're human, and we see these things happen, and there's fear and anxiety and stress, and we all with all that, we want to do right by our students. And so just felt like it was important, given what had happened. This is a sign that the community in Pasco lined kind of the drop-off areas for their bus drivers, just to let them know how much they appreciate them. And I thought it was a nice opportunity to let our staff know how much we appreciate them too in their service. So our first activity, and we do have guests with us today, is to think about board development. And in the summer, and actually in the interview process, the board shared with me that they wanted to engage student voice more and to think differently about what that could look like in the future. We're really appreciative of the school board representatives, but it seemed more like they were presenting information each meeting that they came, and not an opportunity to really engage with them about what their experiences were and ideas that they maybe had to help make the district better. So with your support and kind of a kickoff, we met for the first time, the school board reps, and we talked a little about the possibility of a student advisory committee. So at this point, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Avery from Skyview and Clark from iTech Prep. These are 2 of the school board representatives. There are many others, but they volunteered to be the first ones to kind of give you a report on our first meeting. So I'm not sure who would like to start first. We'll just kind of let you unmute and share a little about the meeting and what we're hoping to accomplish this year.
Okay. Hello, my name is Avery and I'm from Skyview.
Hello, my name is Clark Hegewald and I'm with iTech Preparatory.
And we are super excited to be 2 of your school board reps this year.
Our first meeting back, we got on the right track. We talked about what has worked for the group in the past and began to talk about what we can expand upon. We went over the expectations for our roles in the past, as well as the responsibility that we have to include all student voices, not those just within ASB and our own friend groups.
The overall timeline we're thinking about is refining our ideas in October and November, presenting them in December, refining once more in January and February, and launching somewhere within March and May. We talked about a student advisory committee and about trying to build it in a way to increase student voices, get specific feedback, and increase the leadership opportunities that kids have. And one of the most prominent things we discussed was the idea of increasing the amount of students involved in the school board representative position.
Whereas now we have 1 or 2 representatives from each school, we like the idea of having 30 or so people in the future representing our schools from a variety of different grade ranges. For the moment, we would like to keep it high school while we begin to establish what this committee would look like, but we would like to expand to elementary and middle schools and likely from the 5th grade up with a representative from each grade. Representatives not only of a school, but of each grade would give a wider range of perspective. With such a large addition of kids, it would have to be very well organized. We are considering emailing questions or prompts that we are given at each meeting to a voluntary Google form that schools could send to kids about what issues they see or how they could impact the school board.
And the principal or other advisory staff of the schools could be involved in a more intentional school board representative application process as well. So as of right now, kids have to run for ASB very publicly, and depending on how many votes they get filtered down for the school board representative position. Schools could implement a more specific way of picking school board representatives, whether those kids would additionally be involved in ASB or not, because I think it could increase the success of this group, seeing as those kids are ready for the sole task of a school board representative position. And that could be an interview, a recommendation by teachers, etc.
We are currently talking to other students in our schools to help generate extra ideas to make sure that we're not missing out on any important opportunities. But some other thoughts that we have is to provide a more open forum with our selection, picking meeting dates by emailing students and arranging dates work most, and having an advisor that would help guide the topic of discussion for that week or month, sorry.
I think that's everything.
Thank you both. Love to open it up to any questions to board members. From board members, excuse me.
This is Kathy Decker. I really like the idea of having it go about, having the representatives go beyond ASB, because in some of our, because I don't know in all of the high schools, but I know in some of our high schools, ASB is a class, and I think it is in a lot of the high schools, in most of the high schools, and making it a class can make it prohibitive for certain kids to take. For example, if you're an IB student, you can't take ASB because there's no wiggle room in your schedule. And I imagine that's true of other students who are taking similar types of programs where the schedule is pretty set for you. So taking it out of the ASB gives us a lot more perspective. So I love that. It's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I completely agree. And also ASB is definitely a group of mainly extroverts, and there are so many more voices that can be heard that aren't a part of that group.
They're usually the ones that are leading the cheers at the football games.
I just wanted to thank you guys for the thoughts that you, and just the thinking that you put into this. I love how intentional you were with kind of thinking about how to increase that student voice by thinking about adding not only more in numbers, but also more grades, you know, looking at middle school, elementary school. I think, you know, this is something that as a board, we've talked about really wanting to increase student voice, but wanting to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is thoughtful and productive. So you guys sharing these ideas with us, I think is just great. I'm really excited to hear more from you guys.
I have one question for you. Thank you for the presentation. I agree that you put a lot of thought into this and addressed a lot of the, I think, ideas that we had thought through of how to be more interactive and include more voices. I'm curious, one thing that I noticed was missing in the previous format was it was students presenting to the board, but there was limited interaction. And, you know, I think we're cautious not to ever put anyone on the spot, but, you know, do you think that the students that might participate would be comfortable, for instance, if you say something that piques our interest, that we could kind of drill into that further? Would that be something, because I'm really hopeful for an interactive dialogue, maybe not in a board meeting, but if we had regular check-ins.
I certainly think that the people in the student committee would be willing to share further. Another idea that we discussed is having a couple of representatives for that committee that could speak for the whole community if needed. So that way, if those who may not be comfortable with a drilling like that could still have their ideas represented by somebody who maybe is a little bit more comfortable being interviewed like that.
Okay, thank you. I also love the idea that there would be intentional effort towards, you know, a Google form or survey tool to gather more voices beyond just the committee to reflect in the meeting. I thought that was a good idea. So thank you. Anyone else? Any other directors?
I don't know that I have anything to add other than, again, to express my appreciation for all your work. And I'm super, super eager to hear what your ideas are when you bring them to us in October or November. I think this is something the board has really wanted to see some meaningful change in that student voice piece that's been part of our school board meetings traditionally, but having more of a two-way give and take sort of conversation will bring a lot of value, a lot of important information, valuable information to our work as a board. So I'm really excited to hear what your ideas are and how that might actually get implemented. But thank you guys so much for your work and a very, very well done presentation tonight.
Yes, thank you. Such a good presentation.
Avery, Clark, thank you so much. I think we've heard some feedback from the board, so we'll take that to our October meeting and continue to try to refine what we think the processes might be. One of the things that we also discussed is to have some students do some research on what other districts might have been doing related to this. And so over the course of October and November, you'll have a couple new members come in and share with you and give you an update. And then with that goal of December of kind of saying, this is the structure that we think could work for us moving forward, and hopefully getting your approval or feedback so that we can refine those ideas until, as the team said, that we'd really look to launch in spring. That I want, for sure, I want the group of seniors that are helping us to get to experience it this year, right? And we talked about creating a legacy for the district through this opportunity. So Clark and Avery, you guys did a great job, and all I asked them to do was to show up. I didn't even like, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. So looking forward to our next meeting.
Thank you so much.
So the next conversation tonight is related to Vida Elementary, and so I'm new to the district. You may not have known that. This elementary school was started previously with a bond approval by the community, which we're so grateful for. And that bond has resulted in a lot of great new resources and assets in the district, and we're getting towards the end of the bond cycle. So we have 2 schools left to bring online. And I wanted to make sure that I understand the history of where we're and how we got to today. And we also have new board members. So I wanted tonight to be really step one of probably a 6 to 8 week process where the board really does a deep dive into what this school should look like and who it should serve. And so when I was talking with Kyle about this, we talked about kind of a guiding question, and Kyle actually came up with this one, which I really appreciated, Kyle. It's really, we've had a lot of history to get to this point. And now we haven't actually never experienced 2 school years like we have the last 2. Things have kind of changed quite a bit. And so this is a place for us to pause, to think about where we're at with this facility now. How did we get here? And then what is the best way to serve the students and families, our staff, and our community moving forward? And so step one is tonight. And then I thank you for getting scheduled for tours of the site. I really appreciate that. Erin, thanks for coordinating all that. And Whitney and Jennifer, thanks in advance for walking the board through the site. So that'll be part of the context, and then we will bring it back to workshop and bring it back to meeting over the fall here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to kind of walk you through some of the slides tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Snell. And Dr. Snell is new. I suppose I'm the opposite of new. I'm putting on my historian hat here. So as I touched on briefly at the board's August retreat, and I think as the board knows, the development of magnet programs and programs of choice in VPS began around 25 to 30 years ago with the first phase strategic planning work. And their purpose was to increase student engagement by providing an array of options for our kids and families. So if a student had an interest in international studies or IB or technology or medicine or the arts, for example, they could learn and master their academic standards through that lens. And similarly, educators who had a passion for any of these program areas could teach through that lens. And it's become kind of unique and special for our community over time as our families have evaluated the different options that they have and made choices. Initially, the focus was mainly on high school choices, but programs were, options were expanded K-8. More recently, based on stakeholder input that we received during the 2 most recent updates of the district strategic plan. And the arts in particular always have been a strong interest due to, I think, the district's history of supporting arts programs K-12, along with the success of VSAA and advocacy from our local arts community. Next slide. Thanks. Additionally, when we were planning for the phase 4 bond, the board received an updated enrollment forecast in August 2016 that identified the need for a new school in the downtown area in the medium to long term, and as well as greater capacity at the K-5 level district-wide. We were also seeing at that time growth of the creative economy in the core area of Vancouver. Firms like LSW Architects, Riff Creative, Gravitate, AHA, many others that you could list working in the areas of design, web development, and various forms of art, and civil engineering firms and the like, coming into that downtown area to establish their businesses there. We also, I think, so based on that, we included in the November 2016 bond resolution, and the board adopted a new downtown elementary school was included among the projects. As we presented information about the bond proposal to the community, and that presentation was given to approximately 90 to 100 community and staff groups. It specifically referenced a downtown school of choice with a comprehensive pre-K through 5 program and a focus on arts and innovation. And as you know, the bond was approved in February 2017 with almost a 70% yes vote. Next slide, please. In terms of the downtown elementary site, it was a multi-year process to identify a location for what became known as VITA. We considered 3 possible locations before landing on one. The first one was Block 10, which is located between Washington and Columbia, right in the center of downtown. It's an oversized block. There was a proposal developed by the district, LSW Architects, and the Community Foundation for Southwest Washington for a multi-use site that would include a school. Ultimately, the city chose a different proposal because a grocery store was desired as a priority for that area. We also, with the city's partnership, looked at the Library Square site immediately south of the New Vancouver Community Library. The Killian family was going to be a partner in that effort. Ultimately, that one didn't work out because of the cost of the parking structure that would have been required for that particular parcel. And then the third and site that was actually selected was the old library, the old community library off of Fort Vancouver Way. And it was being used as an administrative services center for the library organization, but and was generally viewed as a underused asset, and had close proximity to a lot of potential organizations and businesses that could partner with the school. In June 2019, the VPS board approved a student's naming suggestion out of more than 800 that were submitted, and that was Vancouver Innovation, Technology, and Arts Elementary School. Next slide. In March 2018, the board, district staff, and architects visited some new tech network schools in Northern California. Director Smith was along on that trip with us, and I may want to speak to that later. We were really, I think New Tech Network is a little bit misleading. I think what we saw down there was largely focused on project-based learning. These were not state-of-the-art facilities that we were visiting by any means. There was, in some cases, very little technology, but what they were doing well was project-based learning, and had received a lot of and engaged their faculty members in a lot of professional development around that. And I recall that we came, as a group, we came back pretty excited about that, and the potential for VITA to possibly be a lab school where that might benefit district schools throughout the district in helping our teachers become more equipped to implement project-based learning. In June 2018, a core planning team of instructional leaders and staff began to work with LSW on the design of VITA. In October of that year, the board approved a construction contract for VITA. And then in June 2020, the board approved a 50-year ground lease and site plan with the city of Vancouver for that old library site that included 3 phases of work, potentially the first phase being the school, which is the district's responsibility, and then later phases were envisioned to include a connector between the school and the existing old library building that might be reused as a location for community and arts-based organizations. And then a potential third phase contingent on funding was a possible performing arts center. In August 2020, the board approved a contract amendment to build the 3 finished floors of VITA and an exterior shell 4th floor for future use. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Snell mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, some of the planning considerations that we had back then as a district have changed. Certainly in the enrollment forecast is one of them. Certainly the pandemic has changed the context, but we want to consider what is still pertinent today as the board gets ready to, talk about how to proceed with the VITA project. One consideration, of course, is that the community has invested in a facility for this school and construction's well underway. We've announced an opening date, which would be the start of the 22-23 school year. We have this site plan and lease agreement in place with the city. There is some level of public awareness about VITA's program focus. Not exactly sure what level, but certainly the name itself conveys an expectation for the public that it is a innovation, technology, and arts focus. There is still that possibility of using VITA as a lab school for professional learning that would benefit schools district-wide. And it remains close to many potential partners in the community, including the Historic Reserve, education programs offered by the Pearson Air Museum, the Community Library, Hudson's Bay, Clark College, and the arts and design-oriented businesses that I talked about earlier, as well as local arts organizations. Long-term community development trends would be the last, I think, consideration that we have here. And of course, none of us has a crystal ball, but we see high density infill continuing in the core area of Vancouver. The new waterfront areas are under construction. And there is a very serious effort underway to take advantage of a window of opportunity to potentially receive federal infrastructure funds to replace the bridge. And we know, from experience here with the 205 bridge and also just communities around the country, when you have a large infrastructure project, it really can change the economic and growth trajectory of a community. So that is a potential trend that we want to pay attention to. I'll toss it back to Dr. Snell for next steps.
So at this point, we just want to pause. And as we discussed at the beginning, we have kind of this guiding question of checking in with you as board members. And then also knowing that we're going to visit the site and actually see the design in place with Whitney, project manager, and Jennifer, the planning principal, and kind of talk through what the programming could look like there. There's some questions about how we fill this school, who attends and what does that look like. And I know that the board is very interested in policy around our programs of choice and how do we best serve our students moving forward with these options that we've had in place, old options and new options. And so just kind of open it up for a conversation a little bit. And so Whitney and Jennifer are on the call as well to kind of listen in. And so turn it back to you, Kyle, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. I appreciate, I think we designed the next month as kind of a phased approach into this journey in VITA. So thank you, Tom, for giving us kind of the context. I would love to hear from Director Smith as the only person that went on the site visit. Sorry to put you on the spot. But 2018 probably seems like a lifetime ago because it was pre-pandemic, but just to get your insights as a board director who was involved and got to go on that site visit, maybe you could share some of your insights.
I'm absolutely happy to. I'm going to warn you, I'm having internet issues and I was trying to problem solve them towards the end of Tom's presentation. Sorry, Tom. So if you can't hear me, if I cut out, I apologize in advance. Yeah, I mean, Tom mentioned the visit that we did to the schools in California, which was just really, really valuable. And I think his description was very apt, that we came back very excited. Everybody was very excited about this idea of using VITA as kind of a project-based learning type school, or making it, as he said, a lab school for that purpose. I don't know how much more insight I can give. I was not part of the board when the conversations first started about VITA. I was not part of the board when that list of bond projects was created, or the original conversations about creating a arts-focused school downtown. I wasn't part of those initial conversations. As Jeff said, we've had a lot of new people come into the district since those initial conversations, which, Tom, is why your insight and your knowledge of the history of it is very helpful. So I appreciate you being willing to take on the role of district historian. But I, other than some direct questions, I don't know if there's much I can add. I think that the question of what was the thinking before, and now what are we thinking now? There have been quite a lot of changes that have happened since those initial conversations in 2013, 2014, 2017. One of my questions, I'm just going to throw a question out there, is do we have an anticipation of getting maybe a new updated enrollment forecast with regards to what we're expecting the enrollment downtown to be? Because I imagine the pandemic may have affected that quite a lot.
Well,
Yeah. Go.
And just to piggyback, I think like what we were looking at early in 2020, I had the same question, but what that forecast is, if we don't alter Harney-Houck boundaries, how many students are forecasted in the immediate vicinity?
I don't have that specific
Right.
data with me right now, but one of the things that's, as Tom mentioned, the shift is that our enrollment has dropped more than we anticipated. We did, as a district, expect to see some kind of gradual reductions and then a leveling off, and then, as Tom mentioned, an acceleration as more family housing was coming in within those boundaries. So that is some data that we can get to the board to help with the decision of who and how to fill the school. I know that it's going to be tough to make enrollment predictions in this climate. I think we're all hoping for a quote unquote normal year of enrollment to kind of understand who's making decisions based on the pandemic versus who's living within our boundaries. So it's a little bit of, it's always a little speculative on your enrollment predictions, but probably a little more uncertainty right now.
I think just to follow up, and I, of course, I'm not expecting it tonight, but I think maybe in anticipation of our next study session, maybe not, we can't predict who's going to enroll versus who's not, but in terms of families and children actually residing in that downtown core. The pandemic altered construction, slowed timelines down, and we also saw that it wasn't attracting families in the same way we might have initially expected. So just wanting, I think the question is really about how many immediate children could be served potentially by that school.
Thank you for that question, and we can follow up with that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from board members kind of about the context that Tom has shared tonight? about how we've gotten here.
I
I have
think
a
you have your hand
quick-
up. Sorry.
Yeah, I did. I tried. I guess I don't know so much about how we got here, but kind of piggybacking on the enrollment, I can't recall what is the range of grades that we're planning on opening the school with, because we're not going to go, we're not going to put fifth graders in there for a year. So what's the range that we're planning on doing that first year with?
The range we're planning on is K-5.
Oh, so
And
you
I-
are gonna put fifth graders in there that first year?
Well, and that's been a conversation that we've started to have and can continue to have, that potentially, parents of kids that are already enrolled in their school, we might only have one fourth and fifth grade teacher, with the idea that parents aren't going to want to transition their kids midstream. So
Right.
that's been a conversation, certainly.
Oh, so that you might do that. Okay.
Might, yep.
Regarding
One-
that, one of the things, because we're not bringing Ruth Bader Ginsburg online, we're not looking at a full district rebounding at this point. And also the pandemic is, we don't want to move kids and then post-pandemic have a problem with one school being too full, or so delaying that also has an impact on K-5 there, Kathy. If when we look at how many kids are eligible, certainly if we have space, we want to accommodate. But also I think Jennifer's right that it's more likely that we'll have younger students that are interested first as a choice than students that are already vested in their schools 4, 5, 6 years.
Right. I think that's the discussion that I remember us having. But again, it was only a year and a half ago, but it seems like it was 12 years ago. So yeah, I was just wondering if that had changed or what the age span was that we were looking to bring in that first year.
I have a question for Tom, kind of switching gears, going back up a little bit. My understanding is that some of the city's plans for that downtown arts core are currently not in the works, just they have budget challenges and a lot on their plate. The idea that VITA would be part of kind of a bigger downtown core, are any of those projects kind of in process still, or I know that we were well engaged with the city, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I believe the arts district as a concept is still intact and part of the city's long range plan. I would have to, connect with someone at the city to find out more specifically what their initiatives are. I think the partnership potential with local organizations, particularly as we get out of the pandemic, hopefully soon, is still is the salient point, right? There are active organizations, the historic trust, just sent out a newsletter saying we're back, I'm going to press forward with their new strategic plan. And, just as one example, I think, the partnership potential with organizations across the community still is very much a vital part of the consideration, whether or not that's in the form of an organized, community arts initiative. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's, the question that Jeff had put up on the slide in terms of, understanding the context of where we are, and just thinking about how to use, it's a beautiful facility. And so what's the best application of that facility for our students and families moving forward, especially knowing that from March 13th, 2020 until today, we've had this very big pivot point. And I don't want to put anyone on the spot because I think this is a big question that we can continue answering next month. But if anyone, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to approach that initially, but we can also reflect on it and have our additional meetings in October if people would like to do that.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that as we think about this going forward, is it possible for us to compile a list of questions and thoughts that we have and maybe get them to Jennifer and to possibly Whitney, but most likely Jennifer, on things like transportation and how are we going to do the choosing, all those things that I know are going through our minds, but require a lot more thought and thoughtful discussion than we were planning on having tonight around this. This is in October, but maybe we can compile that and get it to you.
That would be greatly appreciated, Kathy. So I think, and also having those questions, because I think for the board tours, you're going to be either individually or at most 2 board members at a time to do the tour. And so if you can think about some of those questions prior to the tour and send them our way, or even on the walk of the tour, Whitney and Jennifer can kind of weave those into the tour. And talk about things like transportation. Well, here's where drop off would be. This is what this, so it could give you some greater context as well, because we're taking an idea that none of us really started with, board and superintendent, right?
It's not our
A community that embraced it and supported it at nearly 70% as part of a larger bond package. So it doesn't necessarily mean that 70% people want this school. It means 70% wanted a bond. And then given the context of what's happened over the last 2 months, right? Or 2 years. So those questions would be invaluable to us. And I think if you're sending them, please send them to me. And then I can make sure that they go out to all of the stakeholders that are responsible for trying to figure this out. Because if it is like a transportation question, then we would want our transportation team to be thinking about what you're asking as well. Okay.
My only request would be, I think there's sometimes value in us seeing each other's questions. So if we can get a list, I have a lot of, Jeff, maybe if you could send a consolidated list out to the whole board as well, just so we know what each other are thinking. I'm less on the intricacies of the logistics, but more of the big picture at this point are kind of my areas of interest. And I don't want to jump in terms of in front of anyone else, but in terms of the question tonight, I just wanted to add, equity is not new in our district. I mean, this has been an area that we've been working on for years, decades, but obviously we've been very thoughtful and intentional recently in formalizing some of that equity work. So I just, and Jeff mentioned the idea of the program of choice or magnet policy, and just making sure, I mean, that's a big topic that I want to, include Janelle in, and that we really think through as thoughtfully as possible, to make sure that given the equity work we're doing, how does this school complement that?
And I think that'll tie in nicely to, we're developing the equity policy, which it actually turns out, as Janelle pointed out that at our first meeting, that's actually the easiest part of that. It's then the equity procedures where, like, how do we make this policy work? And that's where that's going to tie into our programs of choice, such as this. Like, how are we making sure that the things we're doing are tying into the policy we just wrote? Which that comes along in, the policy comes along in November, and then the procedures follow, correct, Janelle?
We will share some procedures with you as drafts, but Dr. Schnell will guide a lot of that work.
Yeah. So I think this is all kind of happening at the same time, and so it'll intertwine and maybe step on each other's toes and stuff until we get it sorted out, I think.
Any other thoughts from board directors now, knowing, oh, Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, I just it's kind of a thought, but at the same time a question. So I'm gonna try to explain myself. So I understand kind of the vision of the school and just kind of where it's located. So my question is, like, if the school would have been built, let's say, around the Fourth Plain corridor, taking into consideration the different types of businesses that we have around there, you know, much more cultural businesses and diverse. I guess I just, my question is, I think, picking back on the equity, right? That our vision is a little bit skewed on the sense of the types of businesses that are around this particular school. That I guess I just want to make sure that we don't just focus on the arts that are just particular to the surrounding area, that we also think about the arts in our cultural areas and taking that into consideration, that the businesses that are just around and demographics, because I mean, let's be honest, most of the demographics around the school are the higher white community. So I guess I want to kind of just bring that up as in, you know, would our vision change just because of the location of the school? You know, if the school is in this location, but what if it would have been in the Fourth Plain corridor? Would the vision still be the same? You know, I think it's just, our Vancouver is such a diverse area that I guess I just want to make sure that we think about that when we're serving our students and families in our district. That's really also the vision that we need to take into consideration. I think considering equity, that we also need to be innovative in our thoughts around equity.
Thank you, Sandra. I think that's a great point. And certainly from a historical standpoint, some of the businesses that were down there prompted, I believe, the board at that time to think about that in arts. But as we have evolved programs of choice over time, they really need to reflect student desire and community assets and opportunities. And so building a program that stands the test of time means building a program that can evolve. And we're actually probably in the midst of evolving that vision because of the pandemic before we've even opened the school. And that's the role of the board here, is to, given what we've built, given the requirements of the bond that we need to meet, how do we make this school an opportunity for us as a community moving forward? And how does it reflect our community moving forward? So great question, good reminder.
And maybe how do we design it in such a way that it continues to reflect as the community changes and grows, and the concept of art changes and grows? How do we make sure that those things are, that we don't in 5 or 6 years not doing the same things that we did this, you know, next year? Like that every year there's an evolution of what does an art school look like next year, and what does an innovative, you know, what does PBL look like next year, and how has our community changed? So something designed into the procedures of developing the curriculum and the teaching at that school, so that it reflects the changes that just naturally occur in our community and in the arts.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation around this topic. I know Whitney and Jennifer also are listening in. I can see them taking notes. So we're looking forward to your questions. We're looking forward to the site visits and continued discussion, and appreciate the connection the directors have made between the equity policy, how all these things are related. It's an opportunity for us right now amidst a lot of opportunities, but we want to do it right. And even though we weren't the original visionaries that got this, we're entrusted with it now to make responsible decisions on behalf of the community moving forward. So thank you for your attention to this one. Kyle, is it okay if I move to the next topic?
Yes, I just wanted to say quickly, thank you for kind of bringing this to us, and we have this month-long kind of journey through the conversation, so I appreciate it.
So our next topic tonight is about student learning. That's the goal area. And tonight our deep dive is around the social emotional learning curriculum and screeners. I wanted to start just with some high level outcomes. Is one of the tools that we invested in was Panorama. And that's a student assessment that helps us get information about how to serve our students better and meet their needs. One of the things that I just saw in some research is the investment in social emotional learning. And from this 2015 source, that it said that there's 11-to-1 return on dollars spent on the front end proactively around social emotional learning versus on the back end with interventions or support if we're not investing in this. So I think it's a really important thing. I know that the board, in addition to the Panorama screener, adopted a second step curriculum for K-8, and we're looking at a cell curriculum for secondary. I know that we're partnering with Character Strong on some opportunities and just really thinking about how do we support the whole student moving forward. So it's a good investment is what the research is saying now. And I'm going to turn it over to Darcy to talk a little about Panorama and how it can help us screen our students.
Thank you, Dr. Snell. Good evening. Yeah, universal screening is not new. We do it for academics. We do it for math and reading with our iReady diagnostic. And a universal screener, whether it's for academics, behavior, social emotional, it is designed to help us identify students who might demonstrate poor learning outcomes, may need additional assessment and support. It allows us to adjust environmental factors to better support the whole student, and it provides data on the effectiveness of our core instruction and curriculum. So that is all outcomes we want for academics, but it is also something that we want to make sure that we are measuring with our social emotional learning and really supporting students in that area as well, so that we can be all in for all students and support the whole child. Basically up to this year, the schools have been doing various things. So they definitely have not been ignoring the social emotional learning aspect, but we have not had a core curriculum that is supported district-wide that we can provide equitably to every student K-8. And so that's what our second step program is going to do. And then as Jeff mentioned, Character Strong is a pilot in 9-12. But what we want to do to start out and to make sure that we know everything we need to know about our students is a universal screener that gives us all this information on the emotional well-being of our students. So next slide, please. So children's ability to regulate their emotions and skillfully manage social interactions is critical to healthy development and future success. So if social emotional problems are identified and addressed early, children are less likely to be placed in special education programs, and later in life, they're also less likely to experience school failure, unemployment, and incarceration. Next slide, please. So our Panorama implementation, beginning in this year, we are initiating our partnership with Panorama, and we actually started this process last February, and I know we've talked with the board about that process. And so as a result, we partnered with Panorama. They are an organization that supports Student Cell with research-backed surveys and actionable data reports in a digital platform. So much like our iReady platform, we can gather really important information on our students' social emotional well-being through the Panorama platform. It can be used to track students' progress on standards. So we have state cell standards and benchmarks and indicators, and it can tell us when students need more support. So our implementation this fall, we are looking at a K-2 optional teacher-based survey that is about 8 questions that the teacher actually would fill out. And if buildings choose to use that as a way to gather information on their students, they can certainly do that. We are going to initiate fully and encourage all of our students to participate. So in grades 3 through 12, and 3-5 has a set of survey questions. The students complete it themselves, and in 6-12, the students complete, and they have a little bit different set of questions. And that window is October 18th through November 5th. And the survey topics include positive feelings, challenging feelings, supportive relationships, a sense of belonging, and diversity and inclusion for 6-12 only. And this particular survey is what we are looking at as a well-being survey, meaning that we're asking students specific questions about how they are feeling. There is also what we consider more of a culture climate survey, and that is really more about the climate and the feeling of the school as a whole. So this is a little more geared to the student themselves. And that culture climate would come a little bit later in January. So we really want to focus on the students and their feelings about their experiences at school. So some sample questions are around feelings in general. So the student is told that in the section they're hoping to learn, or we're hoping to learn how you experience different emotions that may occur in your life inside or outside of school. So examples of that: when you're feeling pressured, how easily can you stay in control? How often are you able to pull yourself out of a bad mood? And when everybody around you gets angry, how relaxed can you stay? So gauging their perception of how they can react to social situations. Next slide, please. And then questions about how often have they felt excited, happy, lonely, worried. So getting at some of those emotions. Next slide, please. And thinking about everything in your life right now, what makes you feel the happiest, what is the hardest for you, and then questions around, do you have a teacher or other adult from school who you can count on to help you no matter what? So those are some examples of the questions. And then, like I say, using that data, further supports would be the second step, instructional, whole group instruction. And then this particular survey would help schools then determine how they can serve their students, whole group, small group, and perhaps one-on-one with students needing really strong supports in that kind of multi-tiered supports. And yep, so that's kind of the purpose behind the panorama, the universal screener, and then moving into that supported curriculum.
Thank you, Darcy. So high-level overview that as part of this program that we will be surveying students 3 through 12. There'll be some optional survey tools that teachers can use in our primary grades. And then when we get that data, we'll be utilizing the curriculum that you purchased for us to support kids. The survey questions, sometimes whenever we ask surveys of families or students are surveyed, parents get nervous about that. So there's communication ahead of time. And if parents don't want their students to participate in that, they don't have to participate in that. But it is a part of our our focus on really trying to support these kids. And the research really shows that if kids aren't feeling like they are safe and supported, then it's really difficult to learn the content standards. So open it up to any questions from the board.
I had a question. So the students who are getting the survey, is that, and I don't know if, I mean, this might be a more detailed question than you're able to answer, but is that like they'll all, like, you know, there's 30 minutes of class time where everybody's like on a Chromebook or an iPad, like taking the survey, or is it like, you know, sent to the family and then the family has the student take it like at home, or I guess how is that implemented? And the reason I'm thinking about it is we do have some kids, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, I work in an elementary school, you know, some 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that maybe won't be able to just independently read all of, you know, we have students that, you know, struggle with reading or might not understand what the questions are asking. So are there, you know, options for adults to help them if they need help, but also trying to maintain confidentiality? I'm just thinking of some of those contexts of how they take the screener.
Yeah, so generally, all the schools have a set time where they're doing social emotional learning lessons and different activities. So it would happen during that time. For students that needed the extra help, they could go to counselors for either small group, one-on-one. The teacher might be reading the question because exactly it may be, and they might have to explain kind of what it means. There's actually a slide deck for teachers to go through before they give the survey that has some vocabulary that the kids might need to know, and just some information for them, and, you know, some explanation about, you know, what information we're going to gather and things like that. So there is information and a little bit of a prep time, if you will, for the kids. But they definitely could take it, you know, at home if that's better for the student. The questions will be provided so that families will be able to see those and know what's being asked. So yeah, we definitely want the adults to be involved in that.
Perfect, thank you.
So just to clarify, the sample questions, that was the secondary survey. That wasn't the 3rd through 5th, or are those the same questions?
Yes, those are the same types of questions.
Okay.
They're worded a little bit differently for the younger ones, but those are the same types of questions and the same topics for 3rd through 12th.
Just a comment. Oh, sorry, Tyler, did you still have something you wanted to say?
Go ahead.
I love the fact that we're having our 3rd through 5th, well, 3rd through 12, doing the survey, because one of the best skills we can pass on to kids is for them to be reflective and for them to be able to assess, how am I feeling, and where am I, or where am I, and then what do I do? What are the strategies I need to use to help me get through the day? And this is just one more way of reinforcing that to the children. Also, the screener that I know I used previously was all involved the teacher doing the 1 to 4 on all these different issues. And the kids that tend to fall through the cracks are introverts, are quiet kids. And while there were questions about, you know, are they too quiet? They're still going to be kids that we don't know are struggling. Only they know that they're struggling because they have developed such amazing coping skills. So to have them fill this out and answer these questions, I imagine that there's going to be a lot of, oh my goodness, I didn't realize moments as we, you know, help these kids figure out what they need and how to get it. So I love that the kids are going to be self-assessing. What a great skill to give them.
So what we can do in follow-up meetings is bring district data to you to kind of show where our kids are at. The great thing about using a tool like Panorama is that we can see, with let's say a growth mindset related to math learning. We can see how our kids feel about their math learning compared to kids in other parts of the country, right? And we can see where there's strengths in our system and where there's maybe opportunities to think about, well, what's going on here? How can we better support our students so that they can feel good about themselves as a learner and make growth? This will be the follow-up item as well. After we do that well-being survey and the climate, and we'll kind of decide when we bring it back to you guys as a study session. And then we can show also, okay, so now what, right? So you've done this assessment. How are we turning that data into action that supports our students?
Thank you for that. I was particularly interested, I think the last bullet on the first slide, which was kind of how this data can inform on the effectiveness of our core instruction. As a data person, I'm very interested in learning more about how this tool is going to help us continue to improve, just our core instruction. I have a couple questions, putting my parent hat on. And Jeff, you touched on it just in terms of there will be communication in advance. And so if parents have concerns, they'll be aware and there's an option to opt out. If a student responds to a survey, or let's say a K2 student is identified as perhaps needing more supports, how is that going to be shared with the families? How, just from knowing that we all want to be transparent, how is that offer of additional supports going to be communicated?
It'll look probably different at the different levels, and it is a new tool for us. So one of the things that it comes with is some ideas about how to better support. So if it was at a class level, there's some strategies, like let's say there's some opportunities within the class to just build better community, and then there'll be some suggestions for teachers on how to do that. If there's a specific concern, it would be similar to how you receive information about at the elementary level about math concerns or about writing concerns. We're really looking at these self standards in the state as learning standards. So it would be communicated in that way. At the middle school and high school level, it is a little different because you've got your content specialists. And so at the school level, it might look like a counselor reaching out potentially, because there's some communication here that it looks like the student's asking for help. And so how can we wrap around? When you see a question that says like, I have a trusted adult, if a student's saying no to that, then as a school and as a parent family partnership, we want to figure out what's going on there, right? And try to make sure that student does have a trusted individual. So kind of unique to the situation, but at the elementary level, I would expect our staff to reach out just like they would for math and ELA. At the secondary level, it's probably more uniquely at the admin or counselor level if it feels like there's an area of concern. One of the things that we can do though, when we come back with the data, is we can give you the quantitative data of this is what it looks like. And then we can give you a couple of specific examples of this is what staff have done with the data, just to give you more of the story behind what's happening with this investment.
Thank you. I think that pre-survey communication is going to be really critical, especially for any parents that might feel just curious or concerned about the process, especially where does that data go? Who has access to that survey data? Just thinking out loud in terms of what parents might want to know to feel comfortable.
Those are really good questions and feedback. And as we're building and we've talked about communication with the board in this way before, is at the district level, at the school level, and at the classroom level. And so at the district level, we can answer a lot of those questions with, a landing page around cell data. Why are we doing this? Common Ask questions. And then empower the school level and the classroom level to really maybe get to more of the individual kinds of questions and concerns and opportunities to build on this.
Will this program be translated, or is it available in other languages?
It is available in Spanish, and I do believe we've got the request in for other languages as well. So We are looking into that, but we know the Spanish. And we are going to make sure that we get all the family documents translated if they're not already, so that we can send those out to the families.
Thank you.
Darcy, thank you for joining us tonight. Bill, thank you for your support with this important work, and we'll loop back on this. So hopefully tonight, I know that we have a lot of content and we're kind of going fairly quickly through it, but this is our orientation around the goals, and then we'll dive deeper as we go through the year to hopefully demonstrate progress related to these. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're to our next topic. And I'm going to go through some of the high level information, and then Jim Gray is on the call as well. And we'll talk about maybe a couple of specific situations about what happens when we get quarantines and close contacts, and as we work through that a little bit. You'll notice that these are the similar slides I keep updating you on. I believe the rate is going to be about 512 this week. It should come out Thursday, but that's in the call yesterday with County Public Health. They referenced 512 and saying that we have definitely plateaued, but it's at a high level. Hospitalization rates, they said, are actually improving a little. So, you know, we'll see how this trend plays out, but it seems like we're kind of going to be staying at this level, at least for the next couple of weeks. So I guess it's medium news, right? We're not going up, but we're not going down either. This is our dashboard. I just want to make sure that we always kind of show this data. It's live and it's updated every Wednesday on the district side of things. And then the school notifications are updated daily on the school website. So if families want to know if there was a case or not. Just in general, the number of those are going down a little in terms of our case notifications. The one that just went out this afternoon, I think, had 3 schools impacted. So, you know, I guess I'm always looking for hope in these as we continue to move forward. You know, still our school transmissions have been very minimal, if any, and it's, you know, that we're just having a lot of cases in the community, and those come in, and then our staff has to deal with that and make sure that we're following the close contact and quarantining procedures. As we mentioned before, the flow chart is pretty comprehensive. Each scenario is really unique as we work through it. And we actually had a higher single day quarantine rate when I put these slides together last week. Then another one came, I believe it was close to 300. And so it's always kind of a ebb and flow as kids come out of quarantine. Our staff come out of quarantine, and then others come back in because they're close contacts. So again, context wise, you know, 20,000 students, every single quarantine is very significant. And so I don't want to minimize it at all, but staff are doing a good job of really trying to use all the mitigation strategies and enforce those. And sometimes that's difficult to do, not necessarily in the school setting as much as it is in some of the extracurriculars and outside of school. So it's always, every day is a new opportunity to educate and try to help us have another in-person day. I always feel like I kind of give a lot of doom and gloom when I do this. So I just want to remind people again that, you know, we've had 18, 19, 20 consecutive in-person learning days, right? 5 days a week. So it's a celebration, and we love having our kids in person. And then we also have a healthy group that are being served remotely through VLA. Again, nothing's really changed related to decision-making authority. The one thing that we did get some guidance around quarantines and school closures and classroom closures. And that came out last week, and I shared that with you in your update. didn't really definitively say, you know, like this is what you do or this is how it happens. But what it talked about is if a classroom is going out, if it has to be quarantined, then we as educators have to pivot to remote learning. And it gives a lot of different tools that we can use. And so I'm going to ask Jim just to share that we have worked through that at individual level, and we worked through it at a classroom level. So just giving some context, Mr. Gray.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. First of all, you know, we've had some cases in which kids have had to be quarantined, or even in this case, a teacher has been had to have been quarantined. And we work individually with the affected classrooms to really allow teachers to have some autonomy at this point to how we best serve kids. At a minimum, when an entire classroom hasn't gone out, we will deliver those or provide those packets. But we have some really talented teachers that are still able to do some live streaming or some combinations. But really, we're trying to partner with teachers to do what they're comfortable with, and not set a lot of mandates, but really also provide students with what they need.
Any questions from the board on pandemic response at this point?
And I just ask a quick question regarding testing in schools. I know there's been some supply chain challenges. But I know that some families that's a good resource for them. So if you could just give us an update.
Yeah, and unfortunately not really like we're still challenged to get tests available for us. We're still challenged a little bit on the staffing front, although we're making some progress there to, you know, all these are new responsibilities. And so making sure that we have people that can effectively do that job and continue to advocate at the state or local county health and then state county health level or Department of Health level. One of the things that we've also talked about is a test to stay program, which is also required, needs tests to make that happen. But in certain situations in the guidance, it allows for to get a test and then be able to stay if you don't have symptoms in school, even if you were a quarantined student. And that is something that Clark County Public Health is helping move forward with. Initially at the beginning of the year, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do that with our partners, but they are moving forward with it. But it is about resources right now. So we still have some testing options for families, but unfortunately not at every school site. And so, but our goal is to have at every school site, if a family wanted that option, they would be able to just get that test there and not have to go find another provider. And certainly if a family did not want that option, we're not requiring that. So we'll keep you updated when we can kind of deploy that. It's a challenge right now to make everything connected and have all the resources needed to make it happen. But
well, thank you for that update. I was curious, but I appreciate your clarification at the end that it would just be optional if parents wanted to take advantage of that service.
any other questions on the pandemic stuff?
Thank you to the team for all, not just all of the extra work, but the ever-changing work.
Yeah, you know, we worry about sustainability of staff with the contact tracing and teachers pivoting when kids are out. But you know, it is what it is right now. I mean, there's nothing we can really do about it. Just need to do it the best we can each day with the opportunities that have been given to us. The other thing that I should mention I didn't put in the slides is that we are approaching the vaccination requirement deadline. And so we're doing a lot of communication with staff. The majority of staff have communicated and let us know what they're doing, but there is a portion that we have not heard back from. And so we're doing some phone calls, we're doing email, we're doing face-to-face communication to really make sure they understand that deadline is approaching and the state has not wavered in what we need to do. We need our staff in vaccinated and or to file an appropriate exemption. And so we'll have an update on that. I know weekly I'm providing you with some information related to that and contingency plans, unfortunately, if it impacts the number of our staff that are able to work after October 18th. So lots of balls in the air with the pandemic response team. So, and staff are doing a great job of really trying to make the best of it. Okay. All right, I will share my screen again. We'll move to the next topic. And I think I'll do an introduction to Janelle. So just a reminder, these are our anchor points around the student experience and student equity. We want to make sure that each student is met and served for their unique needs, and we treat them fairly. We want everyone to have the opportunity to succeed. We want to make sure that our school cultures are safe and accepting. We want to make sure that students can go out into the world beyond and really thrive and work with other people. We want to have kindness. We want to grow self-esteem in healthy ways, which was the self presentation. And we also want to help our students to be good critical thinkers moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Janelle, and we're going to come back to this timeline, but we're going to focus in particular on a community voice opportunity tonight.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Dr. Snell. I guess just to reiterate what Dr. Snell shared is our equity work is about, meeting the needs of each individual student in our system. I just wanted to briefly revisit this timeline just as a anchoring point to state that by February 8th, we would hope to have a final draft for you to vote on. But in the meantime, we really want to focus on making sure that we engage and honor the different voices in our community. All right, next slide. So we've outlined a few opportunities for stakeholders to engage in the equity policy process. So on Tuesday, October 12th, we will have a draft available of the equity policy on our VPS website. And the goal is for our stakeholders to provide feedback. And then in turn, that feedback will be shared with the board committee. We'll have another opportunity that you're hosting on Monday, October 18th, and that's the town hall webinar, and that will be held at 6 p.m. Our communications will push out invitations for that for our stakeholders. And then on Thursday, October 21st, that is the student conference day, but our hope is that we would have multiple stakeholders engage in listening session opportunities on that day. And we'll have a 9 o'clock, an 11 o'clock, 1, 3, 5, and 7, really wanting to make sure that we open up multiple opportunities. Our webinar will focus on a question and answer session or opportunities via thought exchange for our stakeholders. And on the 21st, that opportunity is really going to be where folks will participate in breakout rooms and have some dialogue about the draft equity policy. Did you have any questions?
Can you go into a little bit more detail about the format between the town hall webinar versus the listening sessions? I know you said the webinar is more of a Q&A session.
Yes.
So is that, our community members are asking questions and like you and Dr. Snell and maybe other district people are, answering the questions, they're live on the webinar, or is that right?
Yes, so with our webinar, we'll provide a welcome and talk about the process that was used in developing the policy and the why behind our policy, share the draft policy, and then give our stakeholders an opportunity to ask questions. And we'll provide some answers, but with the webinar format, folks will not have an opportunity to ask questions on on the actual call other than in writing. And so
Okay.
we'll respond to those in writing, but they'll also have an opportunity to engage in a thought exchange. So we'll be able to capture their thinking via using that program.
Okay, that's what I was confused about, is how the thought exchange part went into that. So then for the listening sessions, that's more for community members to talk to each other, because you mentioned breakout groups. So
Yeah, so we'll have our equity coaches run breakout rooms, because with these listening sessions, we may have teachers, we may have different leaders, different community members, we may have students. And so we really want to make sure that we're providing space and affinity groups for those folks to have some dialogue about the policy.
okay, that's what I was wondering, if you said the equity coaches are going to be kind of facilitating those groups. That's kind of, I was trying to figure out whether we're just putting community members into groups. So there is somebody kind of facilitating that.
Yeah. Our coaches will facilitate.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
And then as board members, you would be welcome to attend any and all of those sessions if you wanted. Of course, we as staff will take all that feedback and first probably provide it to the equity committee to help process, of which 2 of you guys are members, and then move forward with the whole board of, this is what we heard, this is the feedback that we received around the policy. Here are some possible suggestions as a result of that feedback moving forward. The webinar too, we will record so that initial presentation where Janelle and I both probably, and some other staff, just talk about the process, why we're here, what our goals are. That will be on the website so that later people can still view that and then click on the thought exchange and jump in and see what other people are saying about it and then offer their opinion as well. So we've got an opportunity to kind of listen live and ask Q&A live on October 18th, and then come back to that later and still use that content to weigh in and provide feedback. And then on Thursday, really just have conversations that we would be collecting feedback from as well. Any other questions from the board?
Are there going to be translate or interpreters available if needed?
Yes, our interpreter translators will be present.
We'll also take the webinar part like we've done with some of our other presentations, and when we archive that on the website, we'll have that available in multiple languages and accessible.
I just want to say I'm very excited about all the opportunities we're giving our community to put forth their comments and their ideas and their questions. This is very exciting. Thank you, Janelle, for all the work that you've put into doing this. I'm very excited.
Thank you.
And just a reminder going back that this isn't the only time, so we're doing this in October, and then we're hearing and listening and applying that. And then we have other points for community voice as well throughout this process. And at any point during this too, you as a board, if you want us to go back again to the community, or you're wanting us to pause, or you're wanting, obviously this is going to evolve over the course of the year, and Janelle and our team have done a great job of road mapping it. But you as directors also can influence what you see based on the feedback that we're receiving. Our student advisory committee, in its fledgling growth this year, is also a group of stakeholders that we will try to get some feedback from as well. So. Okay. Well, I think, I believe I'm just going to go through and make sure. Yeah, that's the content that we had prepared for you tonight. I'll send it back to you, Kyle, and I'll stop sharing the screen here.
Thank you. I appreciate all the information we got today. I like this new format of study session. I think this is working well. So thank you for everyone that presented tonight and participated. Lots of exciting work ahead. So with that, the meeting is adjourned, and our next meeting is our regular board meeting in October, which is October 12th, which is in person. Thank you so much.